All right, you're live.
Welcome in, Campo and Joe, on a Friday edition. We like to get going in the off season twice a week. So Tuesday, we throw it out on all of our social channels with Campo and Joe in the afternoon, and a good Friday morning to you from Joe C. from XL Primetime and our head coach, Dave Campo, as we talk all things Jaguars. Coach fired up inside his trophy room. I'm in the TV studio at 1010XL, ready to go. Coach, you ready to go?
I'm always ready. You know that, Joe. And I like the idea that we're doing it twice because I love talking ball. You know that.
Yes, exactly. And this is a good time, I think. And I think what we'll do, we'll hang out with you all for 25, 30 minutes. And anytime you guys want to jump in the chat, we'd love to at least interact with as many Duval fans as we can. So definitely on StreamYard, make sure that you throw a comment or two our way. We'd love that. And Jacob, our producer, if he sees any of them that are pretty good, he'll throw them our way, and we'll make sure that we can answer a question. We will. So definitely check it out. All right, so it's crazy to say this, Coach, but this time a week ago, your Jacksonville Jaguars did not have a general manager. Everything came down about the time XL Primetime went off the air, about 4 o'clock Friday afternoon. News came out, James Gladstone was the general manager, and from there, they have hit the ground running. They have gone up to the combine. James Gladstone looks like his mom should still be driving him to school. He looks that young. But what did you think of the hire? Let's at least start there for this part of the conversation, and then we'll start talking about the combine.
Well, first of all, you can see I have the teal on today to make sure that when we're talking Jags, I'm 100% with them.
Nice.
I'm excited about the hire just from the standpoint that, Liam did what he should do. And that's he trusts the people. Snead, the general manager at the Los Angeles Rams, and obviously McVay and his group. He's done it all the way through his coaching staff. I think this is a good hire. He was with him for a couple of years. I think Gladstone is an up-and-coming guy. Everybody that I talk to says that he's ahead of the age, which I think is important. I think he's shown that he has a plan. And, hey, you never know what's going to happen, but I feel good about it because I think they're going to take the LA Rams plan, which has been pretty darn good in the draft and in free agency, actually.
Yeah, I feel like he's come from good stock, and that's why I was really in that Gladstone camp leading into the actual decision that was made. When they named the 5 final candidates, including Ethan Waugh in the building, I liked what Josh Williams represented from San Francisco. You can go to John Eric Sullivan from Green Bay, and you can definitely look at Ian Cunningham in Philadelphia. They were all I don't know if I would say all 100% qualified candidates to be a GM, but they all had fairly solid credentials. Ian Cunningham, definitely a lot of good work done in Philadelphia and Baltimore. And I like what Josh Williams has been able to do over in San Francisco. But the thing I like most about what James Gladstone has done is that the aptitude is there, Coach. This guy is a guy who's not going to necessarily rule every single decision in an analytics way, but he's going to look at the metrics. He's going to look at the ball player, the quote intangibles that he likes to look for, and he is looking for an let me use beer as an example. You need a little sugar, you need a little water, you need some hops, and you need some barley. You need all that to make a good beer. And I think what he's looking for in a football player is the measurables, but then also what makes up that individual. And I know you know that very well.
Yeah, he talks a lot about intangibles, which is, obviously that's a little bit of coach speak too, but that's one thing that I believe very strongly. And I'm not sure that a lot of these scouts today look at that as much as they do the pure measurables. A quarterback, how strong he is, can he make every throw, all those kind of things. But I think there's 2 things that stand out with LA that make me a little bit excited. One of them is, and there's more than this guy, but Puka Nacua, the receiver for the Rams, was taken in a later round. And there's been a number of those guys. They gave away a number of early picks early with Stafford. And so they've been able to maintain this with being able to go out and get guys in the later rounds, which I think is a plus. The other thing that stands out to me is, it's one thing to have a standard. For example, I hear Parcells talk all the time about guy's got to be a certain height, he's got to be a certain length, all those kind of things. That's beautiful. And I think you look at the standards, but then you look at the film. Does a guy do what you ask him to do? And does he have the work ethic and all the intangibles? And the guy that sticks out to me out there is Fisk, the defensive lineman, because he supposedly has shorter arms. Well, so does Mason Graham, except when you look at Mason Graham on film, he's a beast. So, sometimes 2 inches on the arm is not going to make a difference if the guy's a player. And that's what I think Gladstone brings to the table. They've been able to utilize that out in L.A.
Coach, I've always wanted a couple more inches in height, and so I understand what they're saying. But the measurables are the measurables, and then the player is the player. You got to figure out what he brings beyond just his sheer height and weight. So let's use Mason Graham as an example, because you're a defensive coach. You've been in the game for decades, hugely successful at what you do. This is your craft. When you see a guy like Mason Graham in today's NFL, Coach, and you know how good he was at Michigan, but he weighed in at less than 300 pounds, do you worry immediately just on that weight alone, or you start to take a look at all the other stuff?
Well, first of all, when I look at Mason Graham, he can get off blocks. Now, again, that doesn't mean that, there'll be some times where he might be overpowered in a double team or whatever. But if he's forcing a double team, that allows the linebackers to make a play as well. I think there's two different guys you're looking at. You're looking at the nose tackle that you'd like to be about 330 pounds, 340 pounds. But that 3 technique is all about get off. When you look at a guy like Jones from Kansas City, he can play all over, which I think Mason Graham can as well. But he's a get-off guy. How well does he get off, and how well does he take a block on and get off it to make plays? And that's the one thing that Mason Graham shows. When you watch film, the guy is all over the place because he can get off blocks and make plays. Another thing that I believe is Trayvon Walker would be an outstanding 3 technique, in my opinion, probably better than what he is as an edge, because he's got the ability to get off blocks. Now, as an edge, does he have all the pass rush moves? He's getting better, but he doesn't have them all right now. So there's a lot of things involved there, other than, is a guy 330 pounds? How fast does he run? How quick is he? Can he use his hands to get off blocks? Does he have some moves? All those things are important, Joe.
Yeah, I like the way you're describing it. And I just Googled height and weight of Eric Armstead just as a nice little point of reference. And I'm not sure exactly where he's weighing right now, but 6'7", 280 pounds. Yet he goes, we hope, goes down inside at that 3 technique and wants to either out-quick or outmaneuver a guard and a guard center combination. And so he's got to be able to do that. And so when Mason Graham is checking in just a little light of 300, you look at his inside defensive tackle mate and Kenneth Grant, I think he weighed in at 330 plus, maybe even 340. Right. But that's a totally different cat. Okay, that's what you're talking about. That's that guy that's going to be shading the center and needs to be able to carry a little more weight. Now, he looked pretty good carrying around 330 plus pounds.
Right. Well, those
guys are totally different animals.
Right. Yeah, and I'll tell you what, I'm for whatever reason, I'm excited about Armstead going inside with us because I've seen him play in there. Now, I've also seen him play outside this year, which you don't want to see that again. You want to see his ability to get off blocks and make some things happen. And I believe he's a much better pass rusher, as well as Mason Graham is inside. And so it's going to be interesting to see what Armstead does as well.
That's why this football team signed him, to play inside. And
we don't know that. We don't know that they didn't make a deal to play outside because, there's a little more action, a little bit more physicalness for some of those older guys inside. He might not have wanted to play there initially.
But what does crack me up a little bit, because he may have had a deal with old Trent Baalke. When Trent drafted him in San Francisco, he may have said, hey, this is your last go, last contract. Let me pay you a nice sum. You come in here. And then Eric may have said, you know what? Let them give me a look at the outside because of what we just said. He may not have wanted all that physical contact. What's still crazy to me, though, Coach, is that after Doug Peterson was fired and Ryan Nielsen and the staff was gone, Armstead was clamoring to get back inside. So let's just see if he'll answer the bell on that, because I would love to see it. Coach, he was hugely productive inside as a
absolutely. And you know, that, I mean, you know, all of a sudden when the new regime is in, everybody didn't like the old regime. Yeah. You know, that's kind of human nature. And so I think Armstead Joe is a competitor. He's been a winner. He's been with great defensive football teams. He's embarrassed. I guarantee you he's embarrassed with what he did this year outside. So he's looking to get back because he knows he's a better player in there. And there might have been a deal or whatever, but I'm telling you, I'd probably say the same thing that well, it wasn't me that wanted to be out there. That's what they wanted me for. You know, that's kind of the scapegoat or whatever, or getting back in.
Yeah, it makes sense. I do understand that. And honestly, you from a defensive coordinator's eye know better than most, that was a disaster on that side of the ball. Ryan Nielsen, much hype surrounding the hire. I fell for it. I took the bait. I thought he was going to come in, be aggressive, innovative, and move people around and just dial up fun things to get to the quarterback. It never really materialized. They were low in terms of pass pressure. They were low in terms of forcing turnovers. They were terrible at forcing turnovers. And so all of that has to change. And now the Anthony Campanile-led defense is going to have to be that type of defense that all of Duval's dreaming about right now. And you're going to need some hosses up front to get the job done.
Yeah, no question about it. Yeah, and you know, let me just touch real quick on Nielsen. You know, when he came out of Atlanta, he got more out of the defensive front in Atlanta than they had done in the past. Yeah. And, you know, you remember I mentioned a guy that was on that staff that's a good buddy of mine that said, you know, he's pretty good at getting the best out of guys, but he's going to need a great secondary coach or somebody on the back end. And when you say that, you're talking about the overall picture. You know, he's going to need help on the scheme part of it. It's, you know, and so to me, let's be honest. The players in Atlanta might have played better than the players here did.
Very true.
The association or we've read some things here recently about the players. He didn't resonate well with the players the way he came across. Well, you know, that's part of it. Part of it is that you've got to have that relationship with the players, and some guys can get it, and some guys relate better to certain guys than other guys do. Tom Coughlin. Some guys relate extremely well to Tom. There's other guys that can't handle the pressure. So, I think that was just a mistake all the way. And I bought in just like you did because I knew a guy that knew him personally.
Mm-hmm. It boils down to the talent that you have on the field and the instruction that they're getting, the game plan, the calls themselves, and basically all that you need to pack into a player's brain in the offseason needs to come easy to them on the field. And it did not. And that secondary part that you're talking about, Coach, is real. They need guys on the back end that can handle that type of situation. And they obviously need to create more pressure on the quarterback, which will make that guy in the secondary, be it Tyson Campbell, whomever they plug in Andre Sisco's old spot. Everything needs to come together. They 100% have to improve the ability to get to the passer, knock him on the ground, make him uncomfortable, get him off of his spot, and allow this defense to start making some plays.
Let me make one more comment on that, and then we'll go back to the present, because I hate to go back to the past too much. But remember, a walk-around coordinator, which is what Nielsen was, is not as close to those guys as the actual defensive line coach or the actual secondary coach.
Okay.
It's more of a, here's the package, and I'm the CEO of that package, and I'm going to make the calls and all that. So some of it is based on who those guys are that are working with those guys every day.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know that, when he was in Atlanta, he was maybe working more with those guys. So my point is, it's important the assistant coaches that are actually working with the guys are as big a factor as the defensive coordinator is when it's all said and done. Perfect example is, I didn't coach Deion Sanders directly. I was a walk-around coordinator when Deion was there. Mike Zimmer worked with him. Well, Mike Zimmer is much closer to Deion now than I am. Even though I'm close with him, Zimmer was the guy that worked with him directly. So that's my point. I think the whole total staff is a key to whether or not you play well or not.
So I'm looking right now, and I pulled up the staff, and you have Anthony Campanile, who's going to be heading it up on the defensive side. And then I think Tim Lukabu, the linebackers coach, is a guy that you had mentioned before. Defensive line is going to be Matt Edwards. Anthony Perkins comes with Campanile from Green Bay coach, and he's going to be their defensive backs coach. And then who is it? Ron Miles is going to be the secondary coach. So that kind of speaks to what you're talking about. Both of those guys are going to have a great influence on that back end. Absolutely.
And, to me, I think he was smart to bring in a guy like Ron Miles, because Miles has been around. And nowadays, the only problem I have with these new staffs is I think there might be too many cooks in the kitchen. With somebody, they have 30 coaches on his staff. We had about 10, I think, when I came into the league. So, again, I think you need a little bit of experience, but I think the secondary coach that came with him from Green Bay, there's an association there. He's a younger guy, and that's good as well.
Yeah, at the very least, they've heard each other's voices. They've heard the way they teach and how they interact with players. And I do see that as a positive. And maybe Bill Sheridan, who you know well, is another guy that can come in and basically say, you know what, he's the senior analyst that just says, hey, let's have some commonality in how we're approaching these players, and let's make sure that we all have the same blueprint that we're working off of.
I think that was a smart move as well.
Yeah. All right. So let's get back to a couple of the guys, offensive linemen, defensive linemen. We know how high a priority it is for this football team. Mason Graham, you still like the idea based on, and I know you'll look at the tape and you'll give us an idea, but he did have a big man next to him that helped him make plays. So I'm definitely intrigued by that part of it. I actually go back to the Texas combo a couple of years ago in the draft that you and I broke down, and there were two guys that played off of each other that were both hugely successful because they had another big dude next to him. And so you really got to identify which guy can be by himself the best player for your football team.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I think it's all – that's why when you get them on the board at the combine in an individual meeting, or whether or not you do it at their pro day or whatever – you want that guy to know what the guy next to him is doing, not just what he does, because it's a team.
Right.
You're talking about a defensive team, and everybody's got to be on the same page. And I think the combination is important, but I think the thing we need more than anything else is somebody inside that has some pass rush ability to pressure up inside to be able to force a quarterback not to be able to step up to get him on the move.
All right, one of the guys, they met with Mason Graham. They met with Abdul Carter. He's another guy that at the very least they're going to talk about. So let's at least spend a second there, and then I'll bring up another guy that the Jags met with on the defensive side of the ball. What do you think of the news of Abdul Carter with a stress reaction in his foot I talked to Dr. George Bari. He's our doc on Breaking Bones and on XL Primetime, and he feels like stress reaction is not a major concern, that it's probably going to get booted up. They're going to do a little rehab. They're going to take their time with it, but he doesn't see any reason why an injury like that won't heal in a quick enough time to where Abdul Carter can be what every player or every team is thinking of he can be on the next level. What do you think that piece of news will do to the draft board? Do you think it'll hurt it, affect it, or maybe teams will take Abdul Carter off the board?
Well, first of all, I don't, again, medical is something that they, do at the combine. They get every doctor, and that's almost overkill. Every doctor in the league is there looking at these guys. And to me, that doesn't seem to be an injury that really upsets me. As a matter of fact, I think he'll be ready to go at his pro day to be able to do whatever he needs to do personally. It's not, to me, again, I've heard of it. I've not seen it in action, but it doesn't sound to me like that's going to be a real issue. I know one thing, he's the Micah Parsons type guy in this draft. He's a pretty darn good player. He can do a lot of things in a lot of areas. And he's going to be one of those guys that roams all over the field. I think he's got a chance to go number one. That may temper the number one a little bit, the injury. But I don't think so.
Yeah, it's funny because I think people will still look at him and like you just said, I think you described it very well, limitations for a limited amount of time, and then boom, he's going to be back to being who he is. And he does represent a really dynamic threat on the defensive side of the ball. Whereas when I walk up to the line of scrimmage using Micah Parsons as an example, I got to find out where 11's at. And
exactly.
That could be what Abdul Carter is. Now, do you think, and this is, again, we're probably going to ask this question every week because Jacksonville picks 5th. Do you think Tennessee is looking more at an Abdul Carter, or they're looking more at Cam Ward at the quarterback position? Because that's gonna determine who's left for Jacksonville at 5.
That is a real tough one. And the reason I say that is that the quarterback situation this year is not as strong as it's been at times in the past. And I don't know exactly, Cam Ward has got a lot of talent, but he's not a finished product right now, I don't think, right? So you got Will Levis there, and obviously he hasn't done what everybody had hoped he would do, but he is young, and he's a number one pick, in that top 3 or 4 in the draft. So to me, I think they would be more looking long term. We get this guy Abdul Carter. He's going to be there for 10 years. He's going to be there for 10 years, and he's going to be wreaking havoc for 10 years. I think it's tough to turn a guy like that down unless they're absolutely sure that Levis is done and that Cam Ward can come in and do what they need done. So, obviously I'm not up there. I'm a better studier of DBs and outside linebacker than I am quarterbacks. So, I'm not quite sure, to be honest with you.
Yeah, it's funny. There's such tough positions to find the perfect guy. Quarterback, we know how tough that is. Right. And then that guy who affects the quarterback, as Matt Hayes likes to say, very, very difficult to get to. Myles Garrett says he wants out of Cleveland. Everyone's thinking, hey, can we get that special guy on the edge? Well, you might get that special guy in the draft if it's an Abdul Carter. Heck, I'm looking at the numbers right now, Coach, for Shamar Stewart, who just apparently blew them away yesterday in some of his combine drills. Now he's coming off the edge. He's 6'5". He's 267 pounds. He's running a 4.6 40. I mean, you talk about the stuff that he put together. He shot up the draft board. Now, he may not be rush end or edge number 1, but there's another guy that's going to enter the conversation that some of these teams are going to be thinking about.
Well, just remember one thing, the combine rush up the draft board is not, it's real, but it's not really the number one thing. What has he done on film? Again, there are some guys like Mason Smith, our guy. I'm looking for him to come on this year. So sometimes you make those picks based on, looking forward. Same thing with Trayvon Walker. You're looking forward. You're not just looking at that body of work right there. I think Stewart has definitely got a chance. I watched him yesterday a little bit. Athletically, he's got everything you need. It's just a question of what does he show on film, and I haven't seen him on film enough.
All right, one other guy that I wanted to bring up before we were done, it was one of the guys that the Jaguars did talk to, South Carolina's Nick Emanwari. He's a safety. He's a guy that definitely is he's being mocked mid to late first round, definitely into the second round, and is a guy that can put some pressure on some passing games from that safety position. Not saying this team's going to reach for him early in the draft. I'm just thinking if there is a way that he could fall into the early part of the second round, he would be one to be looking at. And Coach, we're going to debate this all day long, but there are needs in so many areas. If you feel like you've got a tip-top guy that can play that particular position, let's use safety as an example with Emanwari, that you should not ignore a type of player like that if you're looking at that first pick in the second round when it comes around for the Jaguars.
Yeah, I think that, there's no question that our safeties have underperformed. And so obviously that's a position you'd like to get better at. And I think the big thing to me is, how deep is that safety draft? And very few safeties go in the first round. When you look around, a guy has to be really good to be a safety in the first round for whatever reason. But it has changed because now safeties are cover safeties. They're not all box players, which, you could get a box safety. They're all over the place because, there's some big guys and physical but they can't play man-to-man. They can't play quarters coverage where they have to play receivers down the field. So to me, that's a position they're going to look at. It's just where, how important you win up front. So I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't take two position players up front, whether it's on the D line or the O line, and then go on and try to, fix the other. Plus, you don't know what they're going to do in free agency. Yeah, that's what you're looking at too. I agree. But you don't know what's out there in free agency as well. There's a couple of safeties in free agency that are pretty good. Now, I don't think they're going to go crazy in free agency, but they may make a splash pick, with the cap the way it is. We'll see what happens there.
Yeah, because it's funny as we wrap things up with our show today and then get ready for XL Primetime later, which you will be part of. There's a decent set of cornerbacks that are going to be available in free agency, decent set of safeties, decent set of interior offensive linemen that are going to be available. And so they're going to have to really take a good long look at all three of those from a free agency point of view and see if they want to go that route. And then, of course, that'll help determine the draft board.
The interesting thing about the offensive side of the ball is that almost every tackle they're talking to in the first round can also play guard.
Yeah.
So there is a chance, even with that fifth pick, there is a chance that you take one of those guys knowing that he's going to play guard initially, and then you're going to go from there, and I think that's a plus. And then you add in a couple of guards like Booker and some of these guys that are out there that play guard that are pretty darn good, that are mocked in the first round. There's going to be a number of offensive linemen that we're going to have a chance to pick from. And if we don't take one at number 5, we're probably going to take one in the second round or move back in to get one, because we've got a number of draft picks that are going to give us an opportunity to move around a little bit.
All right, champ. We appreciate all the knowledge that you drop on us with Campo and Joe. We had a good time today. Thanks for whomever tuned in. We'll be doing this on Friday mornings, hanging out, and definitely want you guys to jump in as well and talk Jaguar football as we look forward to this draft. Good stuff. Coach Campo, thank you as always. Joe C., both of us will talk to you on XL Primetime later, and thanks for tuning in to Campo and Joe. And by the way, real quick, we're going to have to get some kind of like a Yoda sticker for Jacob, our producer, to make sure.
Listen,
that he gets recognized.
Unfortunately, I am so bad technologically that if we didn't have Jacob around to get me on this podcast, we'd have a real problem. Believe me.
All right, Jacob, take us away. Thank you, man, for tuning in to Campo and Joe.